Hi, Albert. You defended your doctoral dissertation in 1991, which was about business ethics at that time, and EBEN has been created in 1989. So barely 2 years after the creation of the foundation of EBEN, you had your doctoral dissertation on business ethics. So I suppose you have been involved from the very beginning in EBEN, maybe from the start, maybe shortly after, because in 1994 you were already a member of EBEN ExCom. What is the most remarkable in your EBEN history, and how was it in the early days?
Oh, my dear, there were many remarkable things. When the EBEN conferences started with an event at Brussels in 1985, and it was decided to have a biannual event among European researchers on business ethics. This was a very exotic thing among these people who did research in business ethics, and so I entered my university position at Nuremberg at the chair of Horst Steinmann in 1986, and he said, well, Mr. Löhr, there is a very new thing coming up in Europe, and you have degrees in business administration and sociology, and you have interest in philosophy and in many other of these social issues. Why don't you, take care for this new and upcoming issue and prepare some papers and talks together with me for the next EBEN events? And so we started writing papers right for this 1987 EBEN conference at Brussels, which was organized by Henk van Looik at the European Foundation for Management Development, and brought together about, say, 40 people or what. So, and this was actually the starting point of creating a kind of a association. And so from my archive, my documents, I know that the most important decision was made on November 30 at 1600 hours, where a small group, of activists said, well, let's start with such a pan-European endeavor, which at that time meant a West European endeavor, because we still had this Iron Curtain, etc., etc. So actually this was an initiative by some very few Western European professors with an interest in business ethics. And afterwards, in 1989, in Barcelona, there was the first General Assembly. And until now, it is a kind of discussion among EBENists, so to speak, what actually was the first conference or the starting point or the most remarkable event in that sense. Was it 1985? Was it 1987? And was it 1989, or what was it? And so, as I understand, the numbers of conferences, the official interpretation is 1987 at Brussels, 1600 hours. 1600 hours on 30th of November. This was birth time of EBEN. And I think this should be the most remarkable event.
Okay. But then formally it was created as an association a bit later, I suppose.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Your background, as you mentioned, is sociology and management. I have at least the impression that many people who were involved in ethics, on business ethics, applied ethics, in the early days were more from a philosophical and even a theological background. What do you think about this, your position with respect to the more normative debate then? Were you one of the first people who did empirical work, or how was that time?
Now, that was quite different situation in the 80s, you know, when I started with, you know, not only doing research, but also giving speeches and, you know, and writing papers, etc. Because the primary audience was not the management professors or the management researchers, but as you said, philosophers or economists, you know, the hardcore economists from neoliberalism, and also theologians. So the first discussion groups in Germany, I'm talking about Germany, they were among these, let me say, so highly philosophical or abstract disciplines where the management departments were very much hesitating to engage in these debates because they said, well, ethics, that's something for the philosophy department, something for maybe sociologists or economists, but in business we are talking about the traditional question of doing business, and as Peter Drucker said, or Milton Friedman said, the business of business is business, but not ethics. And so that was a kind of a challenge, you know, to always defend your thesis, you know, from the management perspective to these economists. The economists always said, well, that's rubbish because you cannot afford it. This is the neoliberal talk on everything, you know, beyond profit maximization. You cannot afford this. You are talking rubbish. So that's not interesting to us. And that was very interesting in their times, in 1991, yeah, that a dissertation was accepted at a faculty in Nuremberg where it was a mix of economists, management, and sociology professors who said, well, that's okay. He was very well arguing for his position there that we have to take ethics into account in management decisions. So that was very remarkable in that time because all the other, you know, research results and dissertations, etc., they came up in theological faculty or let's say psychology, for instance, or other disciplines, but not in management. That only started in the late 90s.
Okay, now this has changed radically.
Radically, yeah, yeah.
I mean, there is less philosophers now and much more
yeah.
management people and theologians. These have more or less disappeared, I guess, in the younger generation of business ethics.
What actually is a problem, you know? I mean, that's a true issue that somewhere in the let's say zeros, you know, in the 20 years ago, but in the latest time since the financial crisis of 2009, you know. The management departments actually took over, you know, they realized that ethics, or let me say responsibility or sustainability or CSR and all these, you know, etiquettes, they could be of true relevance, you know. But on the other hand, as you said, the philosophers and the theologians somehow disappeared from the debating club in that sense. So all the, you know, publications, all the discussions, the stuff for conferences, is becoming more pragmatic, more empirical, more in the, you know, thinking of the management functions.
So as a social scientist, as a management professor, basically, what you initially were, you seem to regret that there is less philosophers and theologians in the debate, and in fact, you came from the other side in the philosophy. So you make it somehow the bridge, and at the same time you regret that the whole movement went over too far in the other direction. Yeah. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. But it's curious. You know, it's curious because the acceptance, you know, and let me say the real boom of sustainability issues and responsibility issues among management scholars is very much related to their own methods, because they did not adopt what we would say philosophical reasoning. For instance, thinking in dilemmas, and trying to find solutions for ambivalent problems, etc., etc. So, but they, just applied their own style and their own methods of research. And for instance, in marketing research, the empirical approaches, quantitative statistics, to find correlations, etc., among values of customers, and the greenness of products or what. And so marketing, finance, human resource management, psychology, all these disciplines, they have a traditional understanding of applying standardized methods of research, and so they took the topics, they took the topics and analyzed them with their traditional methods. So that's why I think that philosophy and also theology and historical science, historical arts as a competence of reflection, of self-criticism and of understanding that it's not all about numbers, but it's about handling issues of conflict. That actually got lost in some cases.
Maybe it has also something to do, I just guess a little bit, that it has to do also with the fact that before, in your time, you were, the subject of business ethics has been suggested by Horst Steinman because you were in sociology, management, and interested in philosophical issues, as you said before. Nowadays, people are under pressure for their early careers. They have to publish very quickly, and they want to publish in their specialization. And it might be the case that people not have the occasion to make a kind of broader perspective like you at that time could.
I completely agree. But it's also about the incentive systems, for the early career. So now all the younger people, they have to publish, or perish, as we say now. So I had the opportunity to write a book, a dissertation as a book, which had a broad approach also in the historical analysis of the ups and downs of business ethics in Germany, right from Luther and other figures, in the past. And so you can understand that this is always a kind of waves, waves of importance. So, but now most of the younger people, they try to find outlets for their papers in A and A+ journals and others as well, so which are highly ranked. And if you have a close look at all these journal rankings, then you will see that all the exposed management disciplines like marketing or finance, they have lots of A+ journals. And what have philosophers or business ethicists? So the Journal of Business Ethics is the highest ranked journal, but it has no chance against the Journal of Marketing, for instance. And so you shouldn't worry when there is a run for positions that all the universities and the faculty say, well, there's a guy with a publication A+, in the Journal of Marketing, and another, let's say, crazy philosopher or outsider from business ethics has published just in B or C or D journals. So it's clear to us that we have to hire the excellent guys. And so in the end, it's not only about issues, which are acquired to university teaching, but also about methods. Because you are continuing with your research methods once you are hired, and so we have the situation that, as I said, sustainability or CSR or responsibility or responsible management or even business ethics, are actually among the leading subjects also on conferences, you know, in the business arena in Germany. So that's not the issue, but it's all about the methods, you know, how they are addressed, you know, and the methods are clearly, I want to say, non-philosophical, you know, and actually a non-theologian. And so that's my point would be that we should, you know, encourage the colleagues from philosophy, you know, to come up with comments, with critical comments to the current approaches to that subject of CSR and business ethics in these days. Again, like they did in the early 80s or in the 90s.
So we have a kind of paradoxical situation. We have much more production and much more
Right.
research,
Right.
but mostly quantitative, empirical stuff and interesting things also, and highly qualitative. But at the same time, we lack a little bit the critical dimension or the normative debate that we had with philosophers.
So it's always a very simple question. If you listen to a talk at a conference, you know, or to a paper presentation at a workshop, you may want to ask ethics. What kind of ethics are you talking about? So what's your ethical position or your kind of ethical reflection, you know? Are you an Aristotelian, or what are you, you know? Are you a Kantian or whatever? So in the past, this was always, the main point for critical attack. You know, when I said, well, I'm here as a guy from the discourse ethics approach, and all these critical comments came up and said, well, this is impossible in practice, and how do we ever cope up with power, etc., etc. But nowadays people can talk about responsibility or ethics or even sustainability without clarification of their own understanding of this core term. And that's the point where I say, well, we need more philosophy, we need more reflection, critical reflection again.
So that's one of the challenges that we have for business ethics for the coming years, to go a little bit back. Even if you can also say that maybe the empirical work was not so well done as it is now. Sometimes people made empirical claims that were not well backed up as according to the methodology that is required. But nowadays we are kind of in another.
Yeah, don't let me be misunderstood. I'm not against empirical methods, not at all, not at all. So our students, they have to develop competencies in all kind of empirical methods, because they should be able for diagnosis. What the situation is in practice in the world, etc. So that's not about a criticism of empirical research, not at all. But on the other hand, we have a lack of philosophical positioning, philosophical debate, philosophical reflection, and of course, it turns out that in the public debate, for instance, now on the legitimacy of producing weapon systems, for conflicts in the world. So it all ends up in a kind of opinion debate. It's my opinion, your opinion. So it's about political opinions, and nobody is, prepared to come up with an ethical reflection on that stuff. If business in that kind should be done. So after all, I'm repeating myself. It's not to blame empirical research, but it's the need, to cope up with
the normative debate.
The normative debate
around business. We have been talking about EBEN and about the academic side of business ethics. You have also been involved in the Deutsche Netzwerk Wirtschaftsethik, and this seems to be a bit more related with business, with practitioners and with corporations. I have two questions. How was the relation between academics and business people in the German network? And secondly, the name Wirtschaftsethik seems to be broader than what is usually called business ethics. And does this has something to do with the former discussion that we had?
Yeah. Maybe I should start with the second question about Wirtschaftsethik. No? That's. I mean, in the English term would be economics and philosophy, but that doesn't hit the point, because Wirtschaftsethik in the German context is the traditional term. It's the traditional notion which dates back to very early days of let's say Luther and the debates among the Catholic and Protestant Church and so on. The Wirtschaftsethik was always used, and it was only this Anglo-Saxon debate on business ethics, which forced the Germans, to have a closer look at the institutions in such a competitive environment. And actually, this was the core point of my dissertation, to say, well, there is an in-between the individual and the system. So there is an in-between between the, let's say, individual responsibility for a good life, as an individual ethics, and the system ethics, which in Germany was always characterized as the social market economy. So even today, many of the economists say, well, there is nothing in between, because economists, they tend to ignore the institutions, the corporations. And so that was my point, that we have to have a closer look at these institutions, and if you just break it up and open it up, then you can find everything on organizational ethics, human resource, controlling, marketing, etc., so that you can see that there are many of these fields of business ethics. But Wirtschaftsethik was in Germany always the overarching term. And because it's such a general term, right at the beginning in the mid-80s, the bridge between academics and business was huge. It was huge. I can remember the first conferences in the mid-80s, in 1986, 87, 88, 89, etc., where we had long tables with two sides. On the one hand, even very prominent philosophers, like was Habermas, Apel, and so, and on the other side of the table, eminent business managers, and they gave short addresses, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, each, and the professors, the academics on the left side of the table, they always say, well, that's not ethics, that's just, talking about something, but it's not ethics, And on the other hand, if let's say Apel, Karl Otto Apel, his discourse approach, very transcendental philosophy, etc., and the business people said, well, what is he talking about? So what should I? So I spent my time, and that was a very significant event in a very early EBEN conference. It was at Bocconi, Milano, Bocconi Business School, Milano, a very prominent business school in Milano, Bocconi, where David Gautier was invited to give the keynote address. David Gautier was talking there about very so abstract thing. It was hard for me to follow his thinking, and he spoke so very curious and so on. And some of the business people left the room. They left the room and said, "So why did I come to Milano?" So because that's not my problem. So what he's talking, I don't know. I don't understand what he's talking. And this was, this was the starting point for bridging the gap between, let me say, reality, the reality of the business world, and the ivory tower of practical philosophy, at that time. And I think this is the most eminent performance of EBEN, to be persistent, Henk van Looy always mentioned, we have to talk with business, not to business, but with business. And this is, I guess, the achievement of all of EBEN, that finally we succeeded, in building such a bridge and find a common language, and not only a language for the business people, that they understand when I talk about ethics, but also on the other hand for academics, crude academics,
yeah.
to explain, to explain to the audience what their thoughts are. And this is an EBEN achievement. This is a true EBEN achievement. And all these people now coming to EBEN conferences and watching to internet videos, etc. They are, a result of this challenges.
So there is much more awareness about these issues in the business world, and there is, in fact, you could say, some progress, even if there's still some scandals.
So my experience in the last 30 years always was that business was open. Many, not all, but many business managers were open for this kind of learning process, So in the late 80s, for instance, after all, they understood that there's a difference between corporate culture and corporate ethics. So after all, they understood, and they tried to accept that, that there is a difference between reality and norms, between fact and vision. And in the past 30 years, I guess the challenges, they are now coming from business itself, And now I'm a part of some of the leading business ethics initiatives in Germany, and they come up to me and say what I already talked about, that they want to have ethics seminars, because they instructed their members in the latest legal legislations on CSR reporting, or on supply chain management and all these, demands, to have sustainable business. So that's not a problem, to have workshops on the legal regulations.
These requirements. Yes, that's easy.
But actually now their managers, the entrepreneurs, they come up and say they want to know more about the deeper sense, about the deeper reason behind all these legislations. And now we decided to have workshops on ethics, but the demand is coming from business, not from the academics. So I guess our philosophers are, still in charge now to come up with their contributions.
Okay. So thank you very much, Albert.